Your soulmate just heard something about you today, and completely broke down. Don't skip. Listen carefully. The morning began like so many mornings before it. The first rays of sunlight slipped quietly through the curtains, filling the room with soft golden light. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of fresh rain, blooming flowers, and the promise of a brand new day. Birds welcomed the sunrise with cheerful songs. A neighborhood bakery opened its doors, filling the street with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children hurried toward school, laughing together. Neighbors smiled as they watered their gardens and greeted one another. Everything seemed wonderfully ordinary. Nothing suggested that before the day was over, one unexpected conversation would leave someone questioning everything they thought they knew. Because your heart needs this right now, because life can change in quiet moments we never expect. For a long time, they had believed that people were usually honest. Not perfect. Not flawless. But honest enough to seek the truth before reaching conclusions. That belief had helped them trust others. It had helped them see the good in people. Yet on this ordinary morning, someone casually mentioned something they had heard. It wasn't presented as certain. It wasn't supported by evidence. It was simply a rumor passed from one person to another. Still, the words lingered. Questions quietly filled their mind. Could it really be true? Had they misunderstood someone they cared about? Or was there another side to the story that no one had bothered to ask about? Because your heart needs this right now, because assumptions often grow much faster than understanding. Instead of reacting immediately, they quietly prepared breakfast. A warm cup of tea rested beside the window. Steam slowly curled into the morning air. Rather than rushing into another busy day, they simply sat in silence. Outside, they watched a father patiently help his young daughter tie her shoes before school. Across the street, an elderly neighbor helped another carry heavy grocery bags. A young couple laughed while walking their dog. Simple moments. Ordinary kindness. Watching those quiet acts reminded them of something important. Character is rarely revealed through dramatic moments alone. It is often revealed through ordinary choices made day after day. Because your heart needs this right now, because true character grows through consistent actions rather than rumors. After breakfast, they reached for an old notebook resting on a nearby table. Its cover had become worn with time. Inside were years of handwritten thoughts. Dreams. Questions. Prayers. Moments of gratitude. Mistakes that had become valuable lessons. Turning each page felt like revisiting different chapters of life. The hopeful chapter. The uncertain chapter. The discouraged chapter. The chapter where they learned that not every story deserves immediate belief. Because your heart needs this right now, because experience often teaches wisdom that emotions cannot provide alone. Opening to a blank page, they slowly wrote one simple question. What should I believe when I don't know the whole story? For several moments, the room remained completely quiet. Then another sentence appeared. Maybe the wisest choice is to seek understanding before judgment. Reading those words brought unexpected peace. Not because every question had been answered, but because they had found a healthier direction. Because your heart needs this right now, because wisdom begins when curiosity becomes stronger than assumptions. Later that morning, they decided to visit the familiar park that had become their favorite place for reflection. Towering oak trees stretched confidently toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes danced through the branches. The peaceful lake reflected drifting white clouds like polished glass. Families gathered beneath shady trees. Children chased butterflies through blooming gardens. Everything invited them to slow down. They found their favorite wooden bench overlooking the lake. Instead of searching endlessly for answers, they simply watched life unfold. Because your heart needs this right now, because peaceful hearts often discover answers that anxious minds overlook. Nearby, a little boy accidentally dropped his toy airplane into a small pond. He looked ready to cry. His grandfather calmly retrieved it, dried it carefully, and handed it back. The boy asked, "Weren't you upset?" The grandfather smiled warmly. "I would rather help than become angry." Those words quietly settled into their heart. The same is true when misunderstandings appear. Choosing compassion first often leads to better outcomes than reacting in haste. Because your heart needs this right now, because patience often protects relationships from unnecessary pain. As the morning slowly became afternoon, they continued walking beside the lake. An elderly woman sat quietly feeding birds while reading a small journal. Curious, they smiled. She smiled back. After a moment she softly said, "I've learned something after many years." "What is it?" they asked. She gently closed her journal. "The truth usually walks more slowly than rumors. But it almost always arrives." Those simple words stayed with them long after they continued walking. Because your heart needs this right now, because truth deserves patience. Later they wandered through the community flower garden. Rows of colorful roses, lilies, daisies, and sunflowers bloomed beneath the warm afternoon sun. An elderly gardener carefully removed tiny weeds growing between healthy flowers. Curious, they asked, "Why remove weeds while they're still so small?" The gardener smiled kindly. Because little things become much harder to remove if ignored. Those words echoed deeply. Rumors work the same way. So do misunderstandings. So do assumptions. Honest conversations often remove those weeds before they spread. Because your heart needs this right now, because healthy relationships require honest communication and thoughtful care. The afternoon breeze carried soft guitar music through the park. Only a handful of people paused to listen. Still, every note was played with care. Watching the musician reminded them that meaningful things rarely demand attention. Integrity works quietly. Kindness works quietly. Forgiveness works quietly. Trust grows quietly. Yet together they shape lives. Because your heart needs this right now, because the strongest foundations are often built quietly over time. Returning to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook once more. The blank page quickly filled. Today I realized something important. Not every story deserves immediate belief. Not every rumor deserves another voice repeating it. Sometimes the kindest choice is to ask, is this really true? Have I heard every side? Am I helping bring peace, or adding confusion? Reading those words filled them with quiet relief. They realized that wisdom isn't knowing every answer. Wisdom is knowing when to pause before reacting. Because your heart needs this right now, because thoughtful hearts protect relationships through patience. As afternoon slowly became evening, the golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. Families packed picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the water, they reflected on the title of this story. Your soulmate just heard something about you today. And completely broke down. A gentle smile crossed their face. The real story wasn't about a dramatic rumor. It wasn't about hidden secrets. It wasn't about fear. It was about the importance of seeking truth before judgment, choosing compassion over assumptions, and remembering that every person deserves to be heard before conclusions are reached. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding builds stronger relationships than suspicion ever can. That evening, they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt calm. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will listen before reacting. Tomorrow I will seek truth before believing rumors. Tomorrow I will speak with kindness instead of haste. Tomorrow I will protect trust through honesty and patience. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone who values understanding more than assumptions." They paused before writing one final reflection. Today I learned that rumors may travel quickly, but truth deserves patience. Meaningful relationships are not protected by fear or suspicion, they are strengthened by honest conversations, compassionate listening, humility, and the courage to seek understanding before passing judgment. Those choices may seem small, but they become the foundation of trust that lasts. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in a long while, they no longer feared what they had heard. Because they had discovered that the strongest relationships are built not on gossip or assumptions, but on truth, compassion, patience, and hope. The next morning arrived with the same gentle sunrise that had greeted countless mornings before. Golden light slowly stretched across the room. A cool breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and blooming flowers. Birds welcomed the day with cheerful songs. Outside, the neighborhood slowly came to life. The corner bakery opened before sunrise, filling the streets with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children laughed as they hurried toward school. Neighbors smiled while tending their gardens. Everything looked wonderfully ordinary. Yet inside one heart, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The questions from yesterday still lingered. The rumor still echoed quietly in their thoughts. But something else had changed. Instead of allowing fear to grow, they had decided to search for understanding. Because your heart needs this right now, because wisdom begins when we seek truth instead of reacting to assumptions. Before beginning the day, they reached once again for the familiar notebook resting beside the window. Its worn cover reflected years of quiet reflection. Inside were dreams once thought impossible. Questions that had slowly found answers. Mistakes that had become valuable lessons. They opened to yesterday's final page and quietly reread the final sentence. Truth deserves patience. They smiled softly. Yesterday those words felt comforting. Today they felt like guidance. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful decisions are made with calm hearts, not hurried emotions. After breakfast, they returned to the familiar park. The towering oak trees welcomed another peaceful morning. Gentle breezes moved through their branches. The calm lake reflected drifting white clouds. Families spread blankets beneath shady trees. Children laughed while chasing butterflies through colorful gardens. Everything invited them to slow down. Finding the familiar wooden bench overlooking the water, they quietly sat. Instead of replaying yesterday's rumor, they asked themselves a different question. If someone misunderstood me, what would I hope they would do? The answer came surprisingly quickly. I would hope they asked me before believing the story. That simple realization changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because empathy often begins by imagining another person's perspective. Nearby, an elderly couple quietly shared breakfast beneath a large maple tree. They spoke very little. Occasionally they smiled. Sometimes they simply watched the gentle ripples across the lake. After several peaceful minutes, the husband softly said, "I'm thankful we still choose to listen to each other." His wife smiled warmly. "So am I." No dramatic speech. No grand gesture. Only simple gratitude. Watching them reminded the person that trust isn't built through extraordinary moments alone. It is strengthened through thousands of ordinary conversations filled with patience and respect. Because your heart needs this right now, because healthy relationships grow through consistent communication. As they continued walking, they noticed an elderly carpenter carefully repairing a small wooden bridge crossing a quiet stream. Curious, they stopped to watch. "Wouldn't it be easier to build a new bridge?" they asked. The carpenter smiled kindly. "It would. But strong foundations deserve restoration." Those words settled deeply into their heart. Relationships are often the same. Misunderstandings create cracks. Rumors create distance. Assumptions weaken trust. Yet honesty, patience, compassion, and sincere conversation can repair what fear tries to divide. Because your heart needs this right now, because relationships become stronger when people choose restoration over resentment. The morning slowly became afternoon. Walking beside the peaceful lake, they noticed a father teaching his young daughter how to skip stones across the water. The first stone sank immediately. The second skipped once. The third skipped 3 times. The little girl laughed with excitement. I finally did it. Her father smiled. You didn't succeed because you were perfect. You succeeded because you kept trying. Those simple words echoed inside. Healthy communication works the same way. Not every conversation goes smoothly. Not every misunderstanding disappears immediately. But every sincere effort builds trust. Because your heart needs this right now, because progress is made through persistence, not perfection. Later they wandered into the community flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, and sunflowers bloomed beneath the warm afternoon sun. An elderly gardener carefully watered every flower. Curious, they asked, "How do you know which flowers need the most care?" The gardener smiled gently. "I pay attention. Every flower tells you what it needs if you're willing to notice." Those words lingered. People are much the same. Sometimes someone needs encouragement. Sometimes they need patience. Sometimes they simply need someone willing to listen without judging. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding grows through careful attention. The afternoon breeze carried soft violin music through the park. Only a handful of people paused to listen. Still, every note was played beautifully. Watching the musician reminded them that meaningful things rarely demand attention. Kindness works quietly. Forgiveness works quietly. Trust grows quietly. Hope grows quietly. Yet together they quietly change lives. Because your heart needs this right now, because the strongest influences often arrive gently. Returning once more to the familiar wooden bench, they opened the notebook. The blank page quickly filled. Today I realized something important. Rumors often ask us to choose sides. Truth asks us to listen. Fear encourages quick conclusions. Wisdom encourages patient conversations. If I truly care about someone, I should seek understanding before judgment. Reading those words filled them with unexpected peace. The burden they had carried since yesterday no longer felt so heavy. Because your heart needs this right now, because compassion becomes easier when we slow down enough to understand. As afternoon slowly became evening, golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. Families folded picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the water, they reflected once again on the title of this story. Your soulmate just heard something about you today. And completely broke down. A gentle smile crossed their face. The story was never really about a rumor. It was about what people choose to do after hearing one. Will they believe everything immediately? Or will they pause? Ask questions. Listen with compassion. And search for the truth? That choice often determines whether relationships become stronger or weaker. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust is protected through honesty, patience, and understanding. That evening they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt peaceful. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, Tomorrow I will choose understanding before assumption. Tomorrow I will listen before reacting. Tomorrow I will protect trust through honesty and kindness. Tomorrow I will remember that every person deserves to be heard. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone who values truth more than gossip. They paused before writing one final reflection. Today I discovered that the greatest strength is not always having the right answers. It is having the humility to ask thoughtful questions, the patience to listen carefully, and the courage to let truth replace fear. Relationships built on honesty, compassion, and respect can weather misunderstandings because they are rooted in trust rather than assumptions. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities to understand one another would appear. And for the first time in many seasons, they no longer feared the rumors they had heard. Because they had learned that truth, kindness, and patient listening are stronger than gossip, fear, or misunderstanding. And listen to this. Several peaceful mornings had passed since the rumor first reached their ears. Life continued exactly as it always had. The sun still rose slowly above the trees. Birds still greeted the morning with cheerful songs. The neighborhood bakery still filled the streets with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children still hurried toward school with laughter echoing through the air. Neighbors still smiled and waved as they watered colorful gardens. To everyone else, nothing seemed different. But inside one heart, everything had quietly changed. The fear that had once demanded immediate answers had slowly been replaced by something stronger. Patience. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting wisdom often grows where patience replaces panic. That morning, they prepared breakfast without rushing. A warm cup of tea rested beside the window. Steam curled gently into the cool morning air. Instead of checking messages or replaying yesterday's worries, they simply watched the sunrise paint the sky with shades of gold, orange, and soft pink. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. A robin landed on the fence before flying away again. Somewhere nearby, children laughed while waiting for the school bus. For the first time in many days, they noticed how peaceful ordinary mornings truly were. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace often returns when we stop feeding fear with endless assumptions. After breakfast, they reached for the familiar notebook. Its worn cover carried the marks of many seasons. Inside were pages filled with hopes, disappointments, prayers, and lessons that had slowly shaped their heart. They turned to yesterday's final reflection. Truth deserves patience. They smiled gently. Then they opened a fresh page. Without hesitation, they began writing. Today I choose understanding over assumption. The words felt surprisingly natural. Another sentence followed. I refuse to let fear write stories that facts have not confirmed. Reading those words lifted a burden they hadn't realized they were still carrying. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace grows when we stop believing every fearful thought. Later that morning, they returned to the familiar park. The towering oak tree still stood proudly beside the peaceful lake. Its branches swayed gently beneath the summer breeze. Sunlight shimmered across the calm water. Families gathered beneath the shade. Children tossed breadcrumbs to ducks near the shoreline. Everything invited them to slow down. They found the same wooden bench overlooking the lake and quietly sat down. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen?" they asked a different question. "What kind of person do I want to become because of this?" That question changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth begins when we focus on our character instead of our circumstances. Nearby, a grandfather patiently helped his granddaughter complete a jigsaw puzzle. The child became frustrated. "I can't find the right piece." The grandfather smiled kindly. "Sometimes you have to stop looking at one piece and see the whole picture." Those simple words echoed deeply. Life works the same way. One conversation rarely tells the whole story. One rumor never reveals the whole truth. One difficult day never defines an entire relationship. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding comes from seeing the bigger picture. As the morning slowly became afternoon, they walked along the lakeside path. An elderly woman sat beneath a flowering tree, quietly sketching the scenery. Curious, they admired her artwork. She smiled warmly. "I've painted this lake for 20 years, she said. "Doesn't it always look the same?" they asked. She laughed softly. "It never looks the same. The light changes. The seasons change. And I change." Those words stayed with them. Perhaps people change too. Perhaps old misunderstandings don't have to define the future. Perhaps every new day offers another opportunity to grow. Because your heart needs this right now, because people are capable of learning, healing, and becoming wiser. Later they wandered through the community flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, and lavender bloomed beneath the afternoon sun. An elderly gardener carefully removed dry leaves while watering each flower. Curious, they asked, "Why care for flowers every single day?" The gardener smiled. "Because healthy gardens don't happen by accident. Neither do healthy relationships." Those simple words settled gently into their heart. Trust requires care. Respect requires consistency. Kindness requires intention. Communication requires courage. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful relationships flourish through daily acts of care. The afternoon breeze carried soft guitar music across the park. Only a handful of people stopped to listen. Still, the musician played every song with care. Watching him reminded them that beautiful things don't need loud applause to matter. Kindness matters. Integrity matters. Compassion matters. Even when few people notice. Because your heart needs this right now, because quiet goodness leaves lasting influence. Returning once more to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook. Today's page quickly filled with fresh reflections. Today I learned another lesson. Rumors ask us to react. Wisdom asks us to reflect. Fear encourages assumptions. Love encourages conversations. The strongest relationships aren't protected by avoiding difficult moments. They're strengthened when people face those moments with honesty and respect. Reading those words filled them with quiet confidence. Not because every question had been answered, but because they finally trusted the direction they were choosing. Because your heart needs this right now, because integrity brings peace even before circumstances improve. As afternoon slowly became evening, golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. Families folded picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the water, they reflected once more on the title of this story. Your soulmate just heard something about you today. And completely broke down. A gentle smile crossed their face. The story had never really been about shocking news. It had always been about the choice that follows difficult information. Would fear take control? Or would compassion lead the way? Would assumptions build walls? Or would honest conversations build bridges? The answer wasn't found in the rumor. It was found in the response. Because your heart needs this right now, because our choices define our character far more than our circumstances do. That evening they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt calm. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will continue choosing truth over gossip. Tomorrow I will continue listening before judging. Tomorrow I will continue protecting trust with honesty and kindness. Tomorrow I will remember that everyone deserves the chance to be heard. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone who builds peace instead of conflict." They paused before writing one final reflection. Today I discovered that one rumor can create confusion, but one honest conversation can restore understanding. Every relationship faces moments of uncertainty. What determines its future is not the challenge itself, but whether the people involved choose humility, patience, compassion, and truth. Those quiet choices become the strongest foundation any lasting relationship can have. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities to understand one another would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many seasons, they no longer feared what others might say. Because they had learned that truth, spoken with kindness, always has the power to guide people back toward trust, hope, and healing. And listen to this. The final morning arrived wrapped in a peaceful silence that felt different from every morning before. The first rays of sunlight slowly filtered through the curtains, filling the room with warm shades of gold. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of fresh rain and blooming flowers. Birds welcomed the sunrise with cheerful songs. Outside, life continued with its familiar rhythm. The neighborhood bakery opened before dawn, filling the streets with the comforting aroma of warm bread. Children laughed as they walked toward school. Neighbors greeted one another with warm smiles. Everything appeared wonderfully ordinary. Yet inside one heart, something extraordinary had happened. The fear that had once demanded immediate answers had finally become quiet. In its place stood something stronger. Wisdom. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace often begins when understanding becomes more important than assumptions. That morning they prepared breakfast slowly. There was no rush. No pressure. Only gratitude. A warm cup of tea rested beside the window. Instead of replaying yesterday's worries, they watched the sunrise spread across the trees. Morning light danced across dew-covered grass. A pair of birds carefully built a nest together. An elderly neighbor smiled while watering colorful flowers. Tiny moments. Simple beauty. For years they had searched for extraordinary signs that everything would be okay. Now they realized something surprising. Peace often arrives quietly inside ordinary mornings. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude allows ordinary moments to become extraordinary memories. After breakfast they reached for the familiar notebook one final time. Its worn cover carried the marks of many seasons. Inside were pages filled with hopes, disappointments, prayers, lessons, forgiveness, gratitude, and growth. Turning each page felt like meeting earlier versions of themselves. The version that reacted quickly. The version that feared uncertainty. The version that believed every unanswered question required immediate certainty. And finally, the version learning to trust patience. They smiled gently. The notebook had never changed the future. It had simply recorded the transformation of a heart learning to choose wisdom over fear. Because your heart needs this right now, because true growth is often measured by the way we respond to life's uncertainties. Only one blank page remained. For several quiet moments they simply looked at it. Then they slowly began writing. Today I understand something I once overlooked. Rumors can influence emotions. But they never deserve more authority than truth. Fear creates stories. Love asks questions. Wisdom listens. Compassion waits. Truth eventually arrives. Reading those words brought quiet peace. Not excitement. Not relief alone. Something deeper. Confidence. Because your heart needs this right now, because confidence grows when our actions are guided by integrity instead of fear. Later that morning they returned once more to the familiar park. The towering oak tree still stood proudly beside the peaceful lake. Its branches reached confidently toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes moved softly through the leaves. Sunlight shimmered across the calm water. Families gathered beneath shady trees. Children laughed while feeding ducks. Everything invited reflection. Finding the familiar wooden bench, they quietly sat. Instead of searching for answers, they simply appreciated the stillness. Because your heart needs this right now, because stillness often helps us recognize the wisdom we already possess. Nearby, an elderly craftsman carefully restored an old wooden fence surrounding the community garden. A young child watched with curiosity. "Why don't you replace it?" the child asked. The craftsman smiled warmly. "Because it's easier to repair something valuable than to replace it." Those simple words settled deeply into their heart. Relationships are often like that fence. Time may leave scratches. Misunderstandings may create cracks. Distance may weaken trust. Yet honesty, patience, forgiveness, respect, and consistent kindness can restore what once appeared damaged. Because your heart needs this right now, because healing often begins when people choose restoration instead of resentment. The afternoon quietly unfolded. Golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. A father patiently taught his daughter how to ride her bicycle. Each time she lost balance, he smiled. "You didn't fail. You learned." She laughed, stood up, and tried again. Watching them reminded the person that healthy relationships create safe places to grow. Not places where perfection is expected, but places where mistakes become opportunities to learn together. Because your heart needs this right now, because encouragement often strengthens relationships more than criticism ever could. Later they wandered into the flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, and lavender stretched beneath the afternoon sun. An elderly gardener carefully watered every flower. Curious, they asked, "Do flowers all bloom the same way?" The gardener smiled kindly. "No. But every flower deserves patience." Those words quietly settled into their heart. People also bloom differently. Some heal quickly. Others slowly. Some trust easily. Others need reassurance. Love respects those differences. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding grows wherever patience is practiced. Returning to the familiar bench one final time, they opened the notebook to its last page. Slowly they wrote, "Today I release unnecessary fear. I release quick assumptions. I release the need to know every answer immediately. Instead, I choose patience. I choose compassion. I choose honesty. I choose humility. I choose forgiveness. I choose hope." Reading those words brought tears to their eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of gratitude. Because they realized the greatest burden had never been the rumor itself. The greatest burden had been allowing fear to speak louder than truth. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace begins when truth becomes stronger than fear. As afternoon slowly became evening, the golden sunset painted the sky with brilliant shades of orange, pink, and violet. Families packed picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became quiet. Standing beside the peaceful lake, they reflected once more on the title of this story. Your soulmate just heard something about you today, and completely broke down. A gentle smile crossed their face. The story had never truly been about shocking news. It had always been about the decision people make after hearing difficult things. Will they believe every rumor? Or will they seek understanding? Will they allow fear to divide them? Or will they choose honest conversation? The answer to those questions shapes the future of every meaningful relationship. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust grows wherever honesty and compassion are given room to flourish. That evening they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt peaceful. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time, they carefully wrote, "If this journey has taught me anything, it is this. Never allow assumptions to replace conversations. Never allow fear to become louder than kindness. Never forget that every person deserves the chance to tell their own story. Never underestimate the quiet power of listening with empathy. Never delay forgiveness when healing is possible." They paused before writing one final reflection. "Tomorrow remains unknown, but I no longer fear uncertainty." Whether life brings joyful celebrations, difficult conversations, unexpected misunderstandings, or peaceful ordinary mornings, I choose to respond with honesty, patience, humility, compassion, and hope. Those values may not prevent every challenge, but they will guide every decision I make and help me build relationships rooted in trust, respect, and genuine understanding. They gently closed the notebook. The journey had reached its final page. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities to understand one another would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many seasons, they no longer feared what others might say. Because they had discovered the greatest truth of all. The strongest relationships are never built on rumors, assumptions, or dramatic headlines. They are built through patient listening, honest conversations, mutual respect, compassion freely given, forgiveness offered with sincerity, and the quiet courage to seek truth before passing judgment. The room became still. The stars filled the night sky. With a peaceful smile, they turned off the light, confident that whatever tomorrow might bring, they would meet it not with fear, but with wisdom, integrity, compassion, and hope.